America firsters and libertarians fail to understand the true nature of Israel. Now, the failure to be able to see Israel's true nature makes people have unrealistic ideas about what is possible there, and also unrealistic ideas about what is happening there. It's human nature to assume something far away and alien is somehow very similar to what we know. It's also human nature to have an example that is so close to home and familiar that we fail to see it. In these cases, I would like to suggest that modern day Israel and 1800s United States have a lot in common. Both Palestine and pre Columbian America were tribal societies. Now, Palestine's tribal system was a little bit more peaceful than that of the American one, mostly due to the threat of crackdown by Ottoman authorities if conflicts would ever have gotten out of hand. The Ottomans and the British later would often exploit these tribal differences to keep order. The tribal system was diminished by the Palestinian Arab diaspora. Both Israel and North American natives would experience a wave of foreign colonization. Both locations, as the numbers of non natives increased, flashpoints for conflict increased. Both the Palestinians and Native Americans found themselves as pawns uh, in other people's power struggles and often attempted to align themselves with the power politics of warring foreign nations. Both American and Israeli histories are peppered with narratives about who started it. Now, these are always incomplete because many of the small incidents that create the larger incidents never quite make the final cut of the history story. Point being is, actually knowing who started it for real is never going to happen. Uh, in terms of both Native Americans, the United States government, Israel, and the Palestinian Arabs, all sides have very legitimate grievances. Everyone did something bad in this. Both Native Americans and Palestinian Arabs were on near equal footing weapon wise once the wars really turned hot. Both groups suffered, really, from cultural inadequacies in terms of governance and organization. And what I mean by that is Western systems tended to organize more efficiently in terms of both their government, their militaries, their logistics, etc. Whereas both the Palestinian Arabs and Native Americans lacked these cultural advantages, essentially putting them at a disadvantage through most of their fighting. Both Israel and the United States believed in a form of mandate from God in terms of their actions in the land they were taking. Both Palestinian Arabs and Native Americans were forcefully displaced from their homelands and eventually given inferior enclaves to occupy. Both Native Americans and Palestinian Arabs were promised or allowed land that later was taken from them. Both Native Americans and Palestinian Arabs would strike against perceived injustices and rights violations. When I say perceived, that's from their perspective. They may very well be absolutely legitimate. Many were. Typically, when they did strike out, their foes, the Israeli government and the United States government, responded with non reciprocal force, meaning much stronger force than what the initiators used. Both Native Americans and Palestinians have had tribes or geographical areas around them ethnically cleansed, meaning that the Palestinian Arabs still exist, many American Indian tribes still exist, but there were small geographical regions that were cleansed, and there were some tribes that pretty much don't exist anymore. The US government, in their wars against Native Americans, these wars only ended when the Native Americans realized that use of force was futile. Based on this, I think there can be no peace between Israel and the Palestinian Arabs. As long as the Arabs retain a will to resist, there can't be peace. Now, the reservation system of the U.S. works only because of the vast landmass that the U.S. has, creates enough space between these dissimilar cultures where they can coexist, primarily because of distance. This is obviously not true at all of Palestine, where everyone's stacked up on each other, no matter because there's just no room to go. Now, the point of all this is that the behavior of Israel is not particularly unique. These kind of wars have broken out all over the world. There are literally tons of other examples other than the US and Native Americans. What is unique about Israel compared to all these, and by the way, this picture is the Boer War, which has some similarities as well to both of the other conflicts we were talking about. Is what is unique about Israel is one, this is happening in the modern age. Because of it being in the modern age, events are better documented. And Israel is being judged by a standard that didn't exist 150 years earlier. We're expecting, if we actually believe peace can occur in Israel, we're expecting a peaceful solution in a demographic geography where cultures much closer to each other would have difficulty finding peace. Restated, if you had two cultures that were very similar, let's say like Northern Ireland and Ireland proper, where they essentially have the same language, a very, very similar religion, uh, and a mostly shared history. If you put them in the same close quarters that exist in Israel with interlocking regions broken up across the landscape in an area the size of New Jersey, even they would have difficulty finding peace. However, you have a situation where Israeli Jews and their other minorities are so much different than the Arab Palestinians that the idea in these close quarters that they're going to find peace easily isn't very likely. Now, something I want to point out in terms of talking about the idea that the Palestinians are in any way ready to accept peace. Now, mind you, it's not all the Palestinians. There are some that probably would love to come up with some kind of deal. But as long as there's a significant majority of them willing to fight, or even a minority, uh, peace can't happen. I want to talk about something that you're probably unaware of, unless you've watched some of my other videos, is the Trump peace plan that was supposed that they were negotiating during Trump's first term. Now, on the left here is showing essentially kind of Israel as it is, and on the right is Israel under Trump's plan. Now, the Trump plan would have dramatically increased the amount of land held by the Palestinians. They would have had to give up some of it to Israel and vice versa. So there would be some land swap. But in the end, the Palestinians would end up with more land than they have now. The plan included basically building a massive desalination and irrigation system to do agriculture in the Negev desert, building up port facilities in Gaza to be a world-class port, building a tunnel, a very massive tunnel. Hey, maybe Elon could do that. But between the Gaza Strip and the West Bank, basically allowing the Palestinians and the Israelis to basically travel to their different sections without having to cross each other. And the idea would be is this would give the opportunity for the Palestinians to turn into a modern producing trading country. Palestinians completely rejected this offer because they would end up with less land than they had in 1966. You would think that a group in such dire straits with their back to the wall would at least accept the idea of getting a little bit more advantage, even if you were still thinking hostilely, you'd be in a better position to go after Israel. But really, the concern here is if the Palestinians prosper too much, they will lose their desire to fight. And I think that's a lot of what the leadership is concerned about. Uh, so the Trump plan never happened. So I think it's very unlikely that Israel will suddenly find a way to live with a culture that's very different from theirs, as long as that culture has any will to forcibly resist. People expecting a two-state solution or some kind of amalgamation where somehow these groups all come together and make things work, I think is a near impossibility. Now, I concluded a long time ago, based on looking at the history, that Israel was unfixable. So I don't have a side in this fight because both sides are just going to continue to do horrible things to each other. That's what I mean by unfixable. And it really comes down to a matter of timing of the inevitable. Israelis are in a position of power, the Palestinians are not. So essentially, at some point in the future, the Arabs are going to have to completely capitulate, leave, or cease to exist. There are no other options. Now, I wish there was a way to kumbaya this whole thing away and make it work, but it isn't. Now, make it very clear to understand what I'm talking about. I'm not saying that this is a moral decision or a justified decision or a good decision. Uh, it's all around bad. It's unjustified. It's immoral. But I think it's what it is. It's what's going to happen. Just a matter of when and how. All right, in the comment section below, were you aware that part of the Trump peace plan included a very new and modified idea in terms of the two-state solution? Do you think maybe the Arabs might be more up for it now after what's happened with Hamas and Hezbollah? Do you think I'm wrong? Do you think somehow there's peace on the horizon where this is all going to work out, uh, where somehow there is no absolute capitulation of the Arabs, and somehow they come up with a way of working some two-state solution out of it, either the world imposing them upon it or whatever? Comment below. Tell me what you think. Please smash the like button. If the YouTube algorithms brought you here and you're not a regular subscriber, look at my other titles. I get into a lot of things you'll probably like. Please subscribe. And if you know someone who might find this interesting, please share it with them. Thank you for spending time with me this evening. Hope to see you again in a future video.